Love is all around us in our day-to-day lives. Whether it be from your family, friends, or partner, love can bring joy and happiness to our days. And so we set aside one special day to celebrate this emotion. But why do we celebrate love on February? Why is it that on this day, we give gifts and flowers and chocolates and cards to those we love? You might think that Valentine's Day has always been about romance, but that isn't exactly true. In fact, Valentine's Day hasn't even been celebrated on February 4 most of history. Join me today as we explore why do we celebrate love. To understand how Valentine's Day became a celebration of love, we need to look at its origin. And the origins of Valentine's Day are murky and not entirely certain. We don't know who the first person was to say, hey, every February, let's celebrate love. There are many different theories about how we began celebrating Valentine's Day. However, all roads lead to Rome. Well, maybe not all of them, but many of them do lead to Rome. The first theory about the origins of Valentine's Day comes from an ancient Roman festival known as Lupercalia. This festival was held annually on February and celebrated the Roman god of the underworld, Pluto, and his wife Proserpina. During the celebration, young men would gather together and they would select names of women from a big jar. Then the men would pair off with their randomly selected maidens, and they would engage in merrymaking for her. The duration of the festival, they were basically assigned partners for the holiday. And if this sounds similar to another holiday, you're not mistaken. Scholars believe that the tradition of assigning random partners during the festival of Lupercalia inspired the tradition of the pairing off that happens today with Valentine's Day. However, there is no direct link between the two holidays, and it's only a theory. A second theory about where Valentine's Day came from lies with an old Roman custom called Febriata. Febriata was a Roman custom that took place before the Lupercalia festival. During Febriata, the Romans would try to find cures for various illnesses through the use of magic. Of course, this was a pagan celebration, and once Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, attempts were made to replace these pagan festivals with Christian celebrations. One of the ways the church attempted to erase paganism from society was by replacing pagan holidays with Christian holidays. For example, Christmas takes place on the same day as the pagan winter solstice, and Easter takes place around the same time as the pagan spring equinox. The date for Valentine's Day also fell on the same day as Febrata, so it's believed that the church purposely set the feast day for Saint Valentine on February 2, coincide with the pagan holiday. The idea was to replace the pagan celebration with a Christian one. This theory makes sense since Saint Valentine wasn't very well known until after the 18th century. Before then, few people knew much about the saint or even who he was. It's thought that the church purposefully created this holiday to help wipe out the pagan practice of Febrata. As for how this holiday turned into a celebration of love, that part is still a mystery. It's believed that the association of Valentine's Day with love started sometime during the Middle Ages. At this point, the holiday had already become a celebration of romance. However, the exact catalyst for the change is unknown. One possibility is that the popularity of courtly love during the medieval period contributed to the evolution of Valentine's Day. Courtly love was a type of love between a knight and a noble woman in which the knight would serve and protect the woman. These stories were common in literature during the Middle Ages. And so, as Valentine's Day became a celebration of romantic love, tales of courtly love may have inspired the traditions of knights serving their lady and presenting her with gifts and flowers. Another possibility for how Valentine's Day became associated with love lies in Geoffrey Chaucer as the Parliament of Fowls. This poem helped cement February as the month of love. In the story, birds come together on Valentine's Day to choose their mates for the year. And because of this, it became common to associate Valentine's Day with romance and love. These are just two possibilities, though, and there may be others. After all, records from this time period are incomplete, and many things were lost to history. Unfortunately, we may never know the precise moment when Valentine's Day went from a religious holiday to a celebration of love. So now we know how Valentine's Day evolved into a holiday about love. But why do we celebrate it on February 5th? February was chosen for Valentine's Day, probably to replace the pagan holiday of Febuata. But why did the holiday lose its connection to Saint Valentine? Like many things related to Valentine's Day, the answer is not certain, but there are some guesses. The first guess as to why people stopped celebrating St. Valentine's feast day on February is because of confusion. There were actually at least 3 different saints named Valentine, and it's possible that people became confused about which saint should be celebrated. Another possibility is that people stopped celebrating the feast day because it was moved to a different day. Early on, the feast day was celebrated on July, but at some point it was moved to February. Many Christians didn't like the change, and so they refused to celebrate Valentine's Day on the new date. Over time, though, people began to accept February as the date of Valentine's Day. Still, other people may have rejected the holiday simply because it was too closely tied to paganism. Remember, Valentine's Day was celebrated on the same day as the pagan festival of Lupercalia, so it was easy to see why some people would reject the holiday. They viewed it as nothing more than an attempt to make Christianity more like paganism. Today, of course, most Christians don't follow this line of thinking, and the holiday has nothing to do with paganism. But back then, people were wary about any holiday that was too closely connected to paganism. Now let's talk about the man we celebrate on Valentine's Day, St. Valentine. As mentioned earlier, we aren't sure which Valentine was being celebrated on Valentine's Day. In the early church, several Valentines were considered martyrs. However, one Valentine is most commonly associated with the holiday today. That would be St. Valentine of Rome. Valentine was a priest in Rome during the 3rd century AD. He lived during the reign of Emperor Claudius II, and during this time, it was illegal to marry. Claudius believed that single men made better soldiers than married men, and so marriage was forbidden. However, Valentine defied the emperor and continued to perform marriage ceremonies in secret. Eventually, he was caught and brought before the emperor. When he wouldn't renounce his faith, he was beaten and put to death. According to legend, before his execution, Valentine sent a letter to the jailer's daughter, who he had secretly baptized, and signed it, "Your Valentine." This letter is what inspired the tradition of giving Valentine's Day cards. Another legend claims that while Valentine was in prison, he befriended a blind girl, and on the day of his execution, he healed her sight. Both of these legends are likely false, but they help illustrate the characteristics that the holiday of Valentine's Day is associated with today: love, friendship, and kindness. In the past, people would celebrate Valentine's Day with banquets and feasts. It was common for wealthy Romans to invite 8 people to their home for a Valentine's Day feast for married couples. In the Middle Ages, people began to celebrate the holiday with poetry and music. This is likely what inspired the tradition of giving Valentine's Day cards today. Giving handmade cards became more popular during the Victorian era. In 1847, the first mass-produced Valentine's Day cards appeared in the United States. Since then, Valentine's Day cards have become one of the most popular ways to celebrate the holiday. Other popular ways to celebrate Valentine's Day include giving gifts, flowers, and chocolates. These traditions likely developed from the tradition of giving expensive gifts during the Roman festival of Lupercalia. Originally, the gifts given during Lupercalia were usually money or animals. But over time, these have been replaced by more sentimental gifts such as jewelry and flowers. Today, Valentine's Day is celebrated around the world. However, the way it's celebrated varies from country to country. In England, for example, it's common for people to eat fish and chips on Valentine's Day. In Japan, women give chocolates to the men they like. And in South Korea, Valentine's Day is celebrated on May. No matter how it's celebrated, though, the true meaning of Valentine's Day remains the same. A day to show those we love how much we care. What do you think? Is there anything we missed? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.